Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Natalie Edelin from The Twisted Hatter. Hi, Natalie.
Hello.
Welcome to my channel. I mean, I saw you on TikTok, I saw you on Instagram, and it just like stopped me in my tracks because you do the most unusual things out there with crochet. Um, you told me that you want to do unusual things. However,
Yes.
you run it as a business. How do you decide what like when to pursue your artistic vision and when to make something that you know gonna sell? How do you make that decision?
So for me, I really do only make stuff that I like. That way, if for some reason it doesn't sell, if I keep it, I enjoy it. I do like I don't like to do what everybody is doing at the time. So it's basically if I see something in my head and I think, oh, I feel like people will like this, then I make it. I try not to go too overboard though. Like I like to make kind of creepy cute or kind of crazy stuff, but not beyond the point to where it's so niche that only like three people will like it, but more find that happy medium where it's not super normal, but then also, kind of interesting enough to where not everyone is doing it at the time. I don't know if that explains it at all.
Right. Well, like tell me how you got into that. How did you find your way into crochet? How did it all start?
So for me, my sister-in-law had taught me how to make like a crocheted beanie. And I had made like a couple, and then I thought, this isn't for me. Like I got bored very fast. It was just the simple thing. I just learned how to do HDC, and I was like, I'm not interested. And then my son one day, he had seen this picture in a magazine of this knitted hat, and it had these two skulls on the side with this mohawk and he wanted it. And I was like, oh, I don't think I can do that, but I'll try. So I went to the store and got some yarn and hooks because I didn't have them any longer. I had got rid of everything. And I made him the hat and it turned out pretty cool. But of course, he saw it and he was like, I'm not into that anymore, because 3 days had passed. Well, my brother was visiting at the time and he saw it and he was like, oh, yes, I want this and he went and wore it because he was doing snowboarding, and that's really how my business got started. Was my brother decided to wear it snowboarding, and then everybody kept stopping him, taking pictures, saying, where'd you find the hat? And then I realized that I didn't have to stick to like something normal. I could make, whatever I wanted, and there were people out there that wanted things that were less normal. That there's nothing wrong with normal beautiful pieces, but then the people out there that wanted something that really stood out to where like people would stop and take a picture or get noticed and stuff. um that's how it all got started, just word of mouth, and then kind of just kept going from there.
Well, it's one thing to make like one unique piece, right? Like you got an idea, you figured out somehow magically how to actually implement that idea, and your brother turned out to be a perfect marketing tool for that. How do you go from that to like writing patterns, turning it into like a full-size business? What was that journey like?
So like when I started just word of mouth selling stuff, I did do a couple craft shows, the usual thing. And those went okay. And then I had, when it really started though, as far as like patterns, I had made my Kraken hat because one day I was like, oh, it'd be so fun to wear like an octopus on my head, the way that I think. And so I made it, and then all of a sudden, the pictures went viral. People were kind of stealing the pictures, using them on, the scam websites, all that kind of stuff. But it went from that, and then people started writing patterns by looking at my thing, and people kept saying like, why aren't you writing a pattern? I told them I've never read a pattern. I don't know. I don't know most of the stitches that I'm doing. um, but it did force me into thinking, well, hey, if other people are writing patterns off of my design, then maybe I should actually learn how to do this, because I always said for the longest time I don't want to get into the pattern world. Like it's hard, it's stressful. And it is, it's both of those things, but it's also extremely enjoyable, you know, seeing everyone that makes your items. But that's how I got into it, was more of a, I got kind of got pushed into pattern writing, but then, you know,
Well,
I'm very grateful that, you know, it put me there.
right. Well, when you wrote that first pattern, how sure or unsure of yourself were you with that pattern that people would be able to just follow your instructions and get the same results?
Oh, so I actually had somebody offer for me to send them my hat because I didn't know anything. They were like, just send me the hat and I'll kind of pick it apart and then I'll write it down for you. And I was like, oh, that would be perfect because I don't, you know, I don't know what it is. And so she sent me the pattern back. Well, then when the testers were doing it, a lot of them were like, are you sure this is correct? Are you sure this is correct? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what it says. I learned a lot from that pattern though, because, you know, at the time I had gotten testers, but you know, I didn't know any, because there are kind of not rules for testing, but there kind of are things that you should follow. Well, I wasn't aware of any of those. I just put up a thing saying, hey, who wants to try this pattern? You know, and then if people would say, oh, I finished it, I didn't ask for picture proof that they had actually even made the pattern, anything like that. And so when everyone said, oh, it was fine or whatever, I was like, okay, so I had posted it on Etsy. And then all of a sudden, like a ton of copies sold, but then people were writing me saying, we don't understand what this is. We don't know what's happening here. And then I was like, uh-oh, this isn't good. Like clearly this isn't working. So I then had to pull it down, and then I sat there and I learned like all the stitches, like the names of the stitches that I was doing. And then when I was checking, I was like, oh, I wasn't doing a puff stitch, I was doing a popcorn stitch, or I wasn't doing this, I was doing this. And so when I put it back up, then I had to go and resend it out to every single person that purchased it, which was a very large amount. And they don't allow you to do a mass email. You have to do it one at a time. So that was something that I learned very fast, and I never repeated since since then. Which I like to learn the hard way, apparently.
Sometimes that's the fastest way as well.
It was the fastest way. Never again. Like every time I get testers now, I make sure I have picture proof. You know, we go over everything. You know, mistakes will always happen. Like I'm sure in a pattern, you know, people will miss something, but I try to be as picky as possible now, so I don't ever have that issue again.
Well, when you write the pattern, what's your favorite part about the whole creative process, right? Like you came up with the idea of, let's say, another hat, and you figure out how you're going to do it. You wrote it all down, you put it in the pattern, you tested it, you took pictures, you uploaded it, questions come, all the customer service of it. What's your favorite part of that process, and what part you would like happily give to somebody else to deal with?
My absolute favorite part is when people send me pictures after they're done. I do not like writing patterns. It's very stressful for me because I try to sit there and think of every single question I will ever get. Um, and it's impossible to know. Like I get crazy questions, so it's very hard to know like what you're gonna get a question for. So I don't enjoy writing the pattern. I love designing an item, you know, trying to figure out, because I'll sometimes draw it out first and then I'll try to crochet it that way. It doesn't always work, but, you know, most of the time it does. The pattern writing part I don't enjoy. However, when somebody sends me a picture and they're like, oh, I made this for my grandson or whatever, he's a teenager, he's never liked a single thing I've ever made, but then I made this and I got a hug, like it makes me so incredibly happy. Like I'm always grinning ear to ear whenever I get those kind of messages. I'm just like, oh.
Have you ever met somebody who was wearing one of your creations?
Yes and no. When we lived in Germany, I would sell like hats to people on base. So on base, I would see people walking around and stuff, but like here in the US, I've never bumped into somebody. Someday I'll be so happy.
Well, tell me like how those ideas come to you. Like how do you decide on what to make next? And is it ever like, do you ever come up with the idea and then you have no idea how to implement it? Does that happen?
Yes, well, I still have a couple designs in my head that I'm like, eventually I can work my way up to this, like, because I can picture something, but whether I can get those shapes to do what I want them to, because I wouldn't say that I'm like an advanced crocheter or anything. Like, I don't know a whole bunch of stuff. It's more about, oh, I hope this works, and then I frog it, and I do it again, and I frog it. Trial and error is all of it. Um, as far as getting ideas, I honestly don't know how that happens. Like sometimes I will buy a costume and I'm like, oh, I need to make something to wear for this because I want to wear this dress so badly. Or other for some things like a customer will ask me, hey, can you make something like this? Like my spaghetti monster one. It's like a mask, and he's got a noodle face and then a strainer on the head. That's what the guy asked me. He was like, "Do you think you can do this?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm not sure. Let's see." And then it worked out. He loved it, and then people were like, "Could you write a pattern?" So it's always a little bit different for each thing.
Well, when I'm looking at your patterns, there is so many components to them. It's never like just the simple thing. There is like so many elements to it. Is it hard for you to stop yourself from like when is enough is enough?
I I'm big into go big or go home. However, there is something like I do have to keep myself from constantly adding because I'm like, oh, if I put this in there, if I put this on there, it can be way too much. On something also as far as weight, if it's a hat, like the more you add, the heavier it is. So I do have to like, I'll make something and then try to reel myself back a little bit so it's not overboard. Even with right now, I'm working on a pattern and I wanted to make it very beginner friendly. That was my goal, was to make something because most of my patterns are intermediate to advanced. So I thought maybe if I could do something that was more beginner friendly, because I do have a lot of beginners who buy my patterns and then have a very hard time. So while I'm working on this, I'm like, oh, I'm going to add this to it. I'm going to do this to it. And it is now no longer a beginner friendly pattern. So I am doing video tutorials to include into the pattern for each one because I'm like, I wanted this to be beginner friendly. So now, I put myself into a corner.
So when people buy your pattern, do you see it as sort of like Italian grandma recipe when like put a pinch of that, put a pinch of that, or like step by step follow this exactly to get the same result? Like what's your vision for
I
things?
I am very thorough. Like I will tell you exactly what to do because my goal is always like if somebody sees the pattern, I want their item, if they follow the pattern exactly, I want it to be able to turn out identical to what they did. And that's always, I tell my testers, I'm like, if this doesn't turn out exactly like the hat, then I need to know because that's my goal. Now, if people want to make it later and do whatever they want to it, that's fine. But I want to be able to say this is what you bought and this is what you get. So I will tell people like, when you sew items on, I tell you exactly which rows to sew things on. Gauge checks, which are important, but all that kind of stuff. And as long as you follow it, it should turn out. However, that also leads to very long patterns because I explain a lot.
Right. Well, when you write the pattern or when you come up even with the idea, do you have audience in mind? Do you imagine who is going to be wearing it? Or do you make it with yourself in mind?
Myself. I mainly do like, oh, I would want to wear this. And I know that there are maybe not a huge amount of people, but there are people out there who do like stuff that I do. So I mainly have them in mind, whoever likes to dress like I do. Like shawls. I would never design shawls or stuff like that because I don't wear it. So I'm not really sure what people would want as far as that. But as far as like kind of oversized hats or something kind of fairy-ish or all those kind of things, that is easier for me.
If somebody is on the sideline, they thinking like, should I turn my hobby, my fiber arts hobby into a business? What would be your advice?
I I would say definitely do it, but don't expect um it to come all of a sudden. Like it's a lot of hard work. I do recommend because I've heard people say, "Oh, I crochet. I think I'm going to quit my job and just do this," without ever, starting to try to sell anything like that. I do highly recommend, if you do have a job or if your husband's working or whatever, make sure to keep that and then keep crochet as kind of a work your way up to it. You do definitely need to have an audience. You need to have people who like support you. You also can't depend on because like at first when I started, I wasn't asking people like, oh, could you share my stuff? Could you do anything like this? I worked the whole time. And then if I was lucky, people would do that, but you can't expect everybody to. So it's a lot of hard work. But it's worth it if you put in that work.
Well, what's your relationship with social media? Do you use it as a marketing tool, or is that where you find your inspirations, you meet friends? Like, how do you see it?
Social media for me is absolutely a marketing tool. That is also where I have found all of my friends are online also because I'm sitting here all day every day. I don't really leave my house, but it works for everything, which is why it's good to be on as many platforms as possible, because the more you're on, the more you're going to be seen in different places. Now I am not young, so I'm not great with technology. That has nothing to do with age. However, I'm just not good with technology. But I do try to be on certain ones where I understand the technology. And then, which is how, for me, I don't know if can you say different places on here?
Yep.
Okay. So like TikTok for me was a huge thing. Like what I've always heard, like I had heard of TikTok, but I was like, I've heard that's for children. I don't want to go on that, like, or it's, other stuff. But then once I started on there, it was very fun for me because then I could dress up, I could do backdrops, and it's a lot easier to show your work when you can move,
Right.
as opposed to a picture. You can still see stuff, but when it's a video, you can go close, you can back up, you can turn around, and it just shows everything. So that became a huge thing for me. And then Instagram, you can do the pictures and the reels, so those are kind of my two go-to. And then Facebook, the rest of them, if there are other places I don't really know about, but I kind of stick to the three and focus on those.
Were you surprised by how successful your social media, your TikTok went viral on like bunch of times? Like, were you surprised by that you have such a wide audience who loves you?
I'm always surprised when anybody likes my stuff. Like that's why everything I'm just like, oh my gosh, thank you. I'm so happy you like it. uh, or if anyone follows me or anything, it always makes me very happy. Like I do. It's also hard though because you put in a lot of work for some of these things. Even if it's just a short video, it's surprising how long those things can take for anything. But yeah, I'm always surprised if anything goes viral. I don't have a lot of those, but when
Well,
they do, it's like, oh.
I mean, like when you put those videos, that's a lot of work. Like you do your whole makeup and the outfit, and then you come up with this like almost fairy tale like settings that you do the video to. Are you ever disappointed that like you put so much effort and then nothing happens to the video?
It's a little it's a little crushing. All- it's not because I think that I did the most amazing work or anything, but like it does, I'm not good at makeup. So it does take me a very long time to do my makeup. And then like I do spend money on the backdrops, I buy the costumes, make the items and all that kind of stuff. And then when the video doesn't get seen at all, because it is sometimes hard to even get it out of, I don't, the algorithm, I don't know what it is, but people will come back months later and be like, "Oh, we never see your stuff anymore." And that's what hurts a little bit, is because maybe if other people saw it, it would do okay, but since it doesn't, it does suck.
How do you deal with negative or criticizing comments? Because I saw on your TikTok that there is a bunch. It's not that everybody is super nice.
Yeah, two ways. I sometimes I'm pretty good at dealing with it. Like I just kind of laugh. I'm like, I don't care. And then other times I do get irritated. I try not to, but it's still like I had somebody call me half nude and I was fully clothed. So that upset me because I'm like, I'm fully clothed. I'm not nude. Or are you even half nude? Like you can't. So it is hard, but also you do have to realize that a lot of times when people are making those kind of comments, it's more that they have something that they don't like about themselves, which is what people have always said. Because when you're having a bad day, sometimes people do like to take it out on somebody else, and you just happen to be that person. So you do need to kind of realize that. However, it's very hard for me not to match people's energy, but I need to check myself and not do that.
Do you have like a dream for your projects? Like, is there like ever, I don't know, a fashion show, museum exhibition, something that you dream about for the future?
For me, I don't know about a fashion show. Like, yes, that would absolutely be fun. Um, I do think it would be nice to like at some point have like an exhibit with all my stuff, like with these kind of coats, this one, and then like the nutcracker thing, and then I have a couple other ones that I'm, drawn out and stuff that I want to do. I think it would be fun to have, something like that just as a let people go see. But I don't know. There's so many amazing people out there that I don't know how far down the list that would go.
Well, you sell some of the items that you make as finished items. Do you ever have hard time letting them go?
Every time. I still have some, like, so a lot of them sitting around my room that, eventually will probably get listed, but I still am not ready to, so I spend time with them for a while.
Well, when I saw your nutcracker costume, I mean, that's just a piece of art. Like there is no other way to describe it. How how long did it take you? How did you decide on like what details to put there? Tell me like more about that creation.
So that one took me, what was it, 3 weeks? 3 weeks? Was it a month? I don't remember. 3 weeks to a month. Um, I was actually supposed to be working on something else, and then all of a sudden I was just sitting here and I thought, oh my gosh, a nutcracker outfit would be so cool. I don't think I've seen anyone crochet that, as for a person they may have, but I haven't seen one. And I thought, oh, that'd be great. So I actually asked on my TikTok, I was like, should I do something that's in my head, or should I work on what I'm supposed to be doing? And people are like, you're never gonna be happy if you don't do it. So I all of a sudden I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. So I had just sit there, I found just a picture of myself and I kind of drew out, exactly how I wanted it to look, picked out the yarn, and then from there I just kind of hoped that things would work out. Like for certain things, I forget what it's called, the braided stuff that I did on there. I did want it 100% crocheted though. Like I didn't want to have to buy anything for it. So I learned how to do, I didn't know how to do any sort of like the fringe, the twisted fringe. I learned how to do that so I could do that on there. And then I was looking for a design that I could do for those braided bits. So I went on Pinterest and YouTube trying to look at like different things that work. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that would be so perfect for everything. And then as far as like the leaves and stuff, like that was pretty basic. So I, just kind of I'd drawn it out and then I just kind of tried to figure out like how I could crochet that. And that's kind of how it went.
Oh, what blew my mind, absolutely, like blew my mind, are those boots. Like
Oh,
I don't like I just didn't expect boots to be crocheted like this, and they were just like absolutely beautiful.
it's my new favorite. Like I get people that comment a lot on things and they're like, those aren't sanitary, those aren't I'm not wearing them out all over, town or anything. I wear them because I like to match my entire outfit. So if you're going to see the shoes, I need the shoes to match an outfit. And it's very expensive to buy shoes every single time to match your outfit. So that's actually how I started doing that. Was I didn't have anything to match what I was wearing and I thought, "Oh, well, I have these shoes that are already in pretty bad shape. Like I'm not going to wear them normally. So if I try to make something crochet that I can just slip on and off, then I don't have to buy new shoes every time. It just takes a little bit of time to make the item."
Right.
Um, which is what I'll be doing for everything now.
Well, you mentioned to me how you went to that yarn store to buy hook that you didn't have and some yarn when you started. What's your yarn stash looks like nowadays?
uh, it's wall to wall. I have a lot. Well, that it used to be very normal. Like I just have like a little kind of not container, but like just a little shelf full of my yarn. And then we found out we were moving to Germany, and I kind of got into a panic because I wasn't sure what to expect. 'Cause, by the way, they do have gorgeous yarn there, just gorgeous yarn. However, 4-weight, like Aran weight, is not a regular thing there. It's pretty hard to find, which I'm glad that I bought it. So before we left, I bought tons and tons of yarn, and then we moved there, and then it's kind of slowly grown from there. So every time like I use yarn, I always
Replenish
re
it.
restock.
Well, is there a color that you wouldn't have that you would have to go and buy?
Black and white have I run out of black and white quite often, which I am happy that I have a large stock here though, because where we are, there's like they have a Michaels, but they don't have a single skein of yarn I can use, not even one. So I am happy that I do have this so I don't have to either drive 2 hours to a different store or have to order because I like to touch yarn. Like I will order online, but normally if it's my first time buying it or even regular stuff that I always use, I like to touch it first because it's always most yarn is inconsistent.
Well, I was interviewing once handmaster knitter Charles Gandy on my channel, and Charles wrote a book about embellished socks. So he took sock as a base, and then he put all kinds of different embellishments on it. So there is socks that look like snakes and the grass and everything and anything. I'm actually gonna send you the
I'm
link
gonna see.
for you. I think you're gonna like him because he's also very inventive with what he does. He just uses knitting as his medium, and you do crochet. I asked him this question because the book is all about socks and you can do embellishment on anything. I asked him if he regrets concentrating on socks in that book instead of going wider, and he said yes. Like if I could backpedal a bit, I would be doing just like general embellishments on anything.
On everything.
Right. Do you have the same fear that because you call yourself Twisted Hatter and because you started with hats, that it would limit you into what else you can do and how people perceive you?
Yes and no. My issue, so I actually have quite a few like clothing pieces that I can design. My major issue is sizing. Because whenever I make something for myself, I try it on constantly. Every 3 or 4 rows, like I try it on to make sure it's fitting exactly how I want it. And my problem is that I would want it to fit perfectly for every single size, from extra small to like 5XL, anything like that. And that's why I have not done any sort of clothing things, is that
Right.
so much harder for that, because even testing, you'd have to find every single size to fit. And then you also run into the whole thing of, when a lot of people brag that they don't check gauge, which is totally fine. You don't have to, but then you don't get upset when your item doesn't fit. Um, and with hats, it's kind of oh, well, just pull it out real quick. Not real quick, but you know what I mean? Like it's not too much. However, if it's a piece of clothing, that's a lot of work. And when you're not checking gauge, um, I'm scared to step into that side of crochet.
What's your relationship with swatching, with gauging? Do you love it, or do you treat it as a necessary evil?
I treat it as a necessary evil. So I actually don't really check gauge unless if I'm testing for somebody, I will check gauge because I need to make sure that them and I are on the same playing field here. Now, if I come across, let's say, a pattern that I bought, I normally know, like, if they're using 2 strands or a thicker yarn, I know how many stitches, how many I use that would turn out a certain size. So I can just tell by that, and I'm normally pretty sure that, okay, this is going to work just fine. Now, if I come across somebody and they're using a huge hook and then a ton of stitches and it's for a hat, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna have to gauge check because I normally only need 54 stitches and you're using a bigger hook and you're doing 80 stitches. That, I know that's gonna be a tub sitting on me. So then I will check gauge because I know that I'm gonna have to go way down in hook size or something just to like match up.
Well, how often does it happen that you need other people's patterns? Do you have time to need other people's pattern?
I don't necessarily need to use other patterns, but I enjoy showcasing other people. So if I have something that, oh, I need to, like I had somebody ask me, hey, can you make a bat? I could just crochet a bat plushie. It wouldn't be hard. However, for me, I do enjoy, since I do have not huge platforms but larger. I enjoy, let's say, just buying somebody's pattern and then I can be like, hey, this is what I used, as opposed to saying, oh, I freehanded it, because I don't like saying that all the time. Oh no, I just did it freehand. Oh no, I just did it freehand. Can I? Yes, but I'd rather say, oh, I bought it from this person and then I modified it a little bit, to get it to look the way that I need to. Um, but there are people that I know for sure, like when I see their stuff, no way could I ever freehand that. So there are some that no chance could I ever freehand.
Do you have some artists that you like think they're your role models, that you want to be them when you grow up, kind of thing?
So I definitely don't want to be this person. However, I am so obsessed with their work, is Crafty Intentions. Like she does, have you seen her stuff?
Yeah.
They're like, the mythical creatures, the dragons. Her stuff is just, it blows me away every single time. Every time she comes out with something. Uh Crocheter Stephanie Picorni, I've looked up to her for quite a few years, just because she is very, I don't want to say me, but we're very much alike, to where we kind of do crazy stuff. She's the one that, her kids are always, she does their costumes for Halloween. And I was just like, oh, you're just so cool. Because it's, kind of crazy stuff.
How your friends, your personal friends, your family members, how they react to mom doing all these things?
Uh, so I've always had, I'm lucky and I have a very supportive, like friend base, family base, even from the get-go. Like my husband's like, yeah, go for it. And he'd sit there and tell me, my brothers would tell me, everyone tell me like, hey, you're charging too little, you need to raise your prices, all that kind of stuff. They always encouraged me. So I got very lucky with that. And even with my friends, like if, something good happens, they're always like, oh my gosh, super excited for you, which I'm always the same way as well. Like I want somebody to do really well and it's exciting, like share their stuff. Um, and even my mom, even with like some of the stuff that I do, like I'll write her and be like, sorry, mom, I know this is gonna be a little much. It's like, well, bear with me, because I do like to shock people a little bit because I feel like it's important to not let people get very like, oh, this is what she does every single time. So I do like to push the boundaries just a little bit, just to be like, boo. And then go back to what I will normally be like, hey mom, this is maybe don't watch this one if you don't. But even she will show her stuff to like, or my stuff to her friends, which shocks me. But
Talking about charging too little, like, is that difficult for you to decide how to price your work?
I'm still not good at it, which is why I don't do like shop drops very often, is I almost get physically sick every time I have to put a price on something, just because like I don't want people to feel like I'm taking advantage of them, but I also need things to be worth my time. Um, because a lot of the stuff I do, I wouldn't say it's necessarily like impossible for other people to do or super hard or anything. However, coming up with the concept and like all that stuff takes a decent amount of time, especially if you're only doing like a lot of things I do are just a one time only. Like I'll make it one time just to see if I can do it and then sell it. So it's very hard to price. And I know people will be like, oh, we'll just, do the amount of yarn plus per hour. And I can't charge per hour because I have no way to time myself. While I'm working, I'm constantly answering messages, going back and forth. So keeping track of time is impossible.
Well, how much time are we talking about? How much time do you crochet every day?
All day, all night. I take naps, honestly. So normally like I'll run you through my day really quick. I'll normally start, well, it's a 24-hour thing, so it's hard to know where to start. So I work at nighttime mainly. So I'll stay up at night at work because I don't get as many messages at nighttime. And then I'll normally take a nap around 5:30 to 8 a.m., maybe 5:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. And then I'll wake up, answer all my messages, do all that, and then work for a while. And then I'll take another nap around maybe 2 or 3, for 2 hours or something. And then after I wake up from that, so I normally take two 2 hour to 3 hour naps
Do
and
you
then
ever
work.
get burnt out?
I don't get burnt out. However, I definitely need to stop doing what I'm doing now because I am married and I don't have children. My son is 19, my daughter is 23 now, so they're not small. However, I do need to kind of figure out an actual schedule because my husband is very understanding. He's like, no, I understand. Like you need to get all this stuff done, but there's only so long, and I don't want to be that way. But it's just, I keep thinking, oh, if I can just catch up to what I need to do, then, it'll be fine. But I don't know if you can ever really entirely catch up.
Well, what defines that have to do thing, right? Like, do you put this pressure on yourself? Is
I
that
put it
the
Nobody else pressures me to do anything. I absolutely put it on myself because I'm like, oh, I need to put out more patterns. But I do also like the money I make does go towards paying bills and stuff. So I always think that, oh, I don't want to like, what if I have a bad month, and nobody buys the patterns I already have? Like, so I need to make more patterns to make sure that I have a ton of patterns, or I need to make more items. And it's just a constant thing to where I need to try to rewire my brain and be like, it's okay.
Well, but like when you think about it, when you approach what you do from business side, there are shortcuts, right? You can create a pattern that doesn't take that long to write or doesn't take that long to test or looks complicated but not complicated, or you can go crazy and put like every kind of embellishment on that hat, right? And it's going to take forever. Like, do you ever feel like you have to compromise your artistic integrity in order to sell a pattern?
Um, No, because I don't want to. Like, I know that if I were to do less on something, it would be faster or easier for me to make. But then also, I feel like then you're stepping, because like I could just design a beanie, a regular beanie for people to make, but there's so many out there, and I don't want, like, I know people, like a lot of people say, oh, well, it's crochet, everything is done, it has already been done in crochet. I don't believe that at all. I believe I see new stuff all the time that I've never seen before, and I like to be in that category. I don't want to write a beanie, just a regular one, because everybody has them. I want to do something different. And that's what happened with I was trying to make a beginner pattern, and then I figured, oh, it needs more stuff. Because I don't want it to just look completely normal. Which I know I keep saying that, and I need to emphasize there's nothing wrong with completely normal. I just don't want to be that.
Do you ever run out of ideas? Do you ever have time when you have like writer's block or creator's block?
Yeah, I do. I will sit here sometimes and just be like, what do I want to do? Like, I don't know. Um, my problem is I never write stuff down, because I wouldn't ever have that issue if I were to write down my ideas. However, I'm always sitting here and I'm like, oh, I'll remember this, later. And then when it comes to later, I'm sitting here like, oh, I remember I had a couple of really cool ideas and I don't remember what any of them were. So I do need to have a journal. I just haven't done it yet.
So how like organized are you in what you're gonna do this year? Like, do you have anything planned?
I'm not organized at all. Um, I do have, so there are a couple of patterns that I have been putting off for a while, just like one of them in particular, I didn't feel like I was ready to do yet, and I'm hoping I am. Originally, my goal was to do one pattern a month. However, that's not going to happen because this month is almost gone.
Yeah.
So that I've moved past that goal. Um, but I do want to focus on doing patterns this month, and then like trying to, because I do have a YouTube, I just never post on there because I don't like making YouTube videos.
You mentioned the tutorials that you put there as part of the patterns. Do you see yourself going into teaching at any point?
I don't think so. Like for me, like I'm gonna do like full video tutorials for each of the hats that I'm putting in that pattern. However, those are still gonna be private. And then I'm gonna tell people like, hey, if because some people don't know how to read patterns. That's kind of my teaching thing for this. I figured that would kind of be a goal, because I get people all the time that say, oh, I crochet, but I wish I could write a pattern or I could read a pattern. And also when you read patterns, everybody's are different, the way that they write them, everything like that. So for this, for me, I figured it would be a way to teach people like it's all written out, but then also you can watch the video, and then you can also learn how I write my pattern, because you can say increase, you can say decrease, you can say two tog, you can say all 2 HDC, all that kind of stuff. Everyone's different, but I'm trying to teach people like that. But as far as like I don't have patience to like teach people how to do an HDC or that kind of stuff. I just because even watching YouTube tutorials for me is hard. I'm just like, hurry up. Or you have to skip or when people talk a long time, then I'm just like, oh, I have no patience is the problem.
Do you think that's why you make so many different things because you don't have patience, because you want to get to the next thing already?
Yes. 100%. I get bored very easily and I don't have a lot of patience, which is why like I find blankets to be gorgeous, crocheted blankets. However, I don't make them because I would do a couple rows and be like, nope, I'm done. This is not for me. But
Is
then I'll
there
also spend 30 hours on a certain hat or something, but it's different for me because it's like nonstop having to change something, so I have to concentrate.
Do you think you see when you crochet, do you see the shape in your head somewhere? Like, because to me, it's like I understand that crochet is easy to change from like larger circumference to smaller circumference, but your shapes are not just little, decrease here and decrease there. Like, how do you come up with those techniques?
Well, a lot like some things I'll draw it out a certain way, but then once it comes to actually crocheting it and making it work on the body, those are two very different things. Because just because you draw it out doesn't mean that's going to work properly. And that's normally where my uh, thing comes into comes into because I've frogged things before. I'm like, oh, this will be so perfect, and then I went to go put it on my head, and I was like, oh, this doesn't work at all. It looked cool in the picture. Um, but that's what I was saying about crafty intentions. Like you learn stuff from different designers too. Like I always think of when I use somebody else's pattern, it's like a class for me. I think of it as like my schooling. She'll do all sorts of crazy things like, you do this and this is how you shape this and you can do all, and those are things that I never would have learned otherwise. Um, so there's certain techniques that I'll learn from things and that's how you can get certain shapes.
Is there like one piece that you created that you will never part with?
There's definitely a couple. Probably the nutcracker one. I'm pretty sure I'll always keep that. Um, and then I did a crocheted log. It's nothing that special, but it's something that I was extremely proud of because it was very far out of my realm of stuff that I've made before. Like I was like, oh, I want to try to make a cover that I could sit on for it looks like I'm sitting on a tree. Which originally it was supposed to be a big mushroom and it looked like a piece of pizza. So my friends had told me, they're like, why don't you just make like a log? I told them, I was like, I can't do that. That seems like it's going to be very difficult. But it turned out very well and I'll never part with it.
Well, I can't wait to see what else you're gonna come up with because it's always fascinating to see your creations.
Thank
And
you.
thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you for having me.